Hi guys, welcome back to Nibs, the podcast. I'm your host, Milanist,
And I'm your host, Paul Antonio. And this is where we talk about
calligraphy, lettering, and sign painting. In today's episode, as always, we're gonna speak about three different topics. The first one is calligraphy on the internet, pros and cons. The second one,
the second one. The second, the second one is we're continuing with the understanding your tools and materials. So we're going to look at nibs in this aspect of it and how to look after your nibs. And in the
third topic, we're gonna speak about straight pen holders versus oblique pen holders and history about them and something like this.
so this is a request from one of the followers asking
Yes.
about this particular topic. So the requested topic for this podcast is oblique versus straight holders, and when did the oblique holder come in and why?
I feel like I don't need to speak in this podcast. Like I'm just blah 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 blah. People, please don't hate me. Anyways, calligraphy on the internet, pros and cons. I don't know who's gonna start. I mean, first, like okay, I'll say a few things. Calligraphy on the internet, pros. I think it is really cool because internet helped calligraphy to reach a lot of people. I'm pretty sure calligraphy never been in front of so many people in the history of calligraphy itself because just internet allows so many people to get in contact with it. But at the same time, there is also cons like people see a lot of sped up videos and they get the wrong ideas about it and in general like it's the perfect balance, it helps calligraphy in one way, but in another way it hurts it a little bit because there are lots of people who see sped up videos or edited videos, very good edited, and they don't even think that those videos might be edited, something can be manipulated and stuff like this, and they just assume, oh yeah, this person writes like this. They might think he writes so fast or so perfect, but people don't realize a lot of times when something is on the internet. Let's say I write the word calligraphy and I upload a picture or a video. A lot of people like it, but nobody realizes that I might have written this piece of calligraphy like 100 times before I upload it there, and all these things. Yeah, come on. All these things gives a wrong idea to people. Yeah, Paul is laughing because he's been writing all his life, and he's not one of those that he has to write few times to choose the. Oh, you. you. Like, okay, guys, I'm leaving this podcast. Bye.
It's so funny.
What's funny? It's come on, it's true. Like
It is true. It is true. I mean,
uh,
it's not just
why are you laughing?
it's not just, for instance, when I do a post, I don't think you realize how difficult it is to do a post and to do a post correctly. So I'm talking about the accuracy of the work, and that's my main focus. So I don't put like pretty hearts in my video and all of that. It's about the lettering. But there are times when I've done a post and I thought I pressed record and I didn't. So I had to do it again. But before that, you have to come up with the content for the post. That takes time. So what you're not seeing is the time it takes to prepare the area, to put the post together. If you didn't press record, you have to do it again, or if somebody calls you, and there's all of this stuff around it. So you're not seeing the real work that goes into it. You're only seeing that little bit of magic. And that gives you a false sense of appreciation for how much time and effort goes into the planning of the work and the actual execution. And of course, the time it takes to upload it and to get the text right and all of that. More than that, for people who are not accustomed to writing consistently for a long time, they might have had to do that script 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times before they got to the point where they were happy with it to post it. So you thinking you just sit down and it'll just magically happen is already a fallacy. Now, there are some great pros to calligraphy on the internet, and there are some really bad cons to calligraphy on the internet. And, the pros are, as Milan said, getting it out to lots more people. That also comes with some really bad issues. And some of those issues are, for instance, you might not be seeing the best version of that script. And as a beginner, you might not know what the best version of that script is. So chances are you might be copying something that is not the best thing for you to be copying. But how do you know what's good and what's not if you're only just starting off? And a lot of people don't really say, I'm a beginner and this is my journey. They just post it and say, this is this. One of the other things that I've really been struggling with over the last couple of months is incorrect terminology and information. So lots of people post lots of things about lots of calligraphy, and quite a lot of the time, the term they use to describe the script is wrong. Now, the problem with that is, if you're a beginner and you don't know that, you're going to continue thinking that script is X when it's actually Y. So getting the correct information can be a little bit difficult because sometimes the people doing the post, they don't even know what the name of the script is. And, I can hear some of you saying, but, the aim is to get the writing done. Yes, it is. But if you're going to call something by an incorrect name, know that you have a responsibility there. You are putting that information out there. So what about the beginners who are following you and trying to find that information for their own learning? So, you have to be a little bit more careful with looking up the script, looking at the accuracy of the script, trying to figure out if this is actually the name of the script, because you really want to be able to do the research on that script.
You know what I've noticed? Like a few days ago, I reposted something from Lalit, and
Yes.
it's just an alphabet, of course, fracture. What he does is mostly fracture, and I'm reading the captions, and he writes script, LM for Lalit Moria script. Like he could, I was like,
Okay, but Lalit's fracture is not fracture.
yes, but
First of all,
when
it is not fracture at all, right? Because his script is a combination of 3 or 4 scripts. So there's fracture in there, there's textualis quadrata in there. The wedge-shaped serifs come from Prayer-Gothica or Proto-Gothic, and they are also used in some of the uncial scripts. So his script is a real amalgamation. It's a really wonderful, accurate, contemporary fracture. And the other thing about fracture is you don't change the pen angle in fracture. It stays at the same pen angle. And his pen angle changes quite a lot. He goes from 30 degrees to a horizontal line where he changes the actual angle of the nib. So that's not really fracture.
So it's correct to call it with his name script.
Oh, I 100% I would also equate it and I would call it with his name, but also call it a modern fracture because
when I reposted it, I wrote modernized fracture.
Yes, I saw that. I was very proud of you.
Was it correct?
Yes, it was. Well done.
Okay, that's fine.
Because you were sitting there going, "Oh, I wonder what Paul's going to say." Oh, God.
Yes, of course. guys, you don't know, but like for the last 1 year or something, since I was in London to Paul, since that moment, because I've done a lot of mistakes. I'm a beginner myself, but yeah, he learned me to look for things and to know where I'm doing mistakes, and pretty much every time, if it's Instagram or YouTube, when I'm calling something with the names, I'm really like in my head, okay, I know Paul is gonna see this, so be careful what you write.
See, this is one of the things I love about you, Milan. You're so excited about the craft that you're really interested in learning about all of it. And that is something that I think a lot of beginners and a lot of intermediate and even advanced people lack. Their interest is in the writing. not in the learning about the writing. That's something else.
But it's
And
all
if you don't,
connected.
it is connected, but for some people, it's about writing. It's not about learning about the history of the writing. And, for me, if you don't know about the history of the writing, how are you going to know if what you're doing is correct? We have all this history, and the history really helps us to understand the structure of the script. And so this is a real issue on the internet. And equally, and this is something I don't understand. You are online. You will go to somebody and say, where do I find this information? Now, when I post something, I always hashtag what it is, what I'm using, blah 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 blah. And so many times people say, which script is this? And I go read the hashtags. Because I've spent the time writing up all of that information, and
People
it's
don't
there.
read the captions. Like, this is
Okay,
so
but
annoying.
but it's not even that. You then have people saying, where do I find information on this script? I'm like, use Google.
Yeah, man, dude, yeah, you're so right, Paul. Like, come on, people, please, like, whoever is listening or watching, we live, it's 2021. I'm like, whatever questions you have in your mind, of course, you can ask simple
Yeah,
questions, like, we
of
are pages
course.
about this, but still, like, doesn't it come first to your mind that you can find pretty much everything on Google, YouTube, like, I've been so many times people ask me questions which I'm looking at. I just ignore them because it's annoying for me. Like, come on, dude,
It, it, it
use your brain.
Yeah, all you have to do, in as much time as it takes you to say, where do I find textualis information on textualis quadrata? Put that into a search engine, and you know what? You will get much more information. And then you can message me and say, so I found this information. I've been reading through it, and it's really fascinating. I just wanted to know, what is this? Now, that I am happy to answer, because you found something on my feed that you found interesting. You took your time and your effort and your energy to do a little bit of research, but you got confused by something. I'm happy to help you from that point, because you are actively investing in your development by doing the research first and then coming to somebody to talk to them about a slightly more complex version of it. That's great. That's a wonderful way to sort of approach the learning.
But
And
you
this
know
is
what's the
something that I'm
problem? You know what's the problem? The problem is people are lazy.
Yes.
People are lazy. They don't want to put the time to research. They want answers right away. And
Of course.
the thing is, we can give those answers, but even if we give you the answers, this still won't help you. You need to put the time. You need to not be a lazy person.
Okay, so
Yeah.
getting back to calligraphy on the internet, right? So
Well, this is all about.
this is one of the pros and the cons. I'll look at one of the cons that's really problematic, and that is, how do you know what's accurate and what's not? Very, very simple. When you look at the lines, are the letters between the lines? See, we were talking about lines in the last podcast. Are the letters touching the lines? Because if they're not touching the lines, then if it's a formal script, then they're not even. And if they're not even, there's no regularity in the structure of the script. Are your ascenders the same height? Remember, the T is a third higher than the X height. It is not as tall as the D or the L. It's not even halfway between the X height and the ascender line. Are the descenders the same height as the ascenders? What is the regularity of the script? When you look at basic letters like I, N, M, U, V, W, do they all look like each other? Because if they don't look like each other, then there's probably some issue with the accuracy of the script. O, A, E, C, D, G, Q. All these letters with bowls. If the bold base letters don't look the same, then something is wrong with the script. It doesn't have the accuracy that you need at a beginner level. Now, if an advanced person like Dennis Brown or Yves Leterme or Brody Neuenschwander or Julian Waters or John Stevens, if they've taken the lettering and they've done something to it and they've written these variations of the letter, they still have consistency of shape and form and rhythm and movement embedded in the writing. Those things take years to develop, and they take years of very concerted practice. Now, if you're looking at modern calligraphy, because the letters don't tend to always be the same size, what regulates the script? So it's to do with the amount of pressure on the nib. How thick are the strokes? How thick are the thickest parts of the strokes? And how often does that repeat itself? So you have things that you can look for to gauge the accuracy of a script when you come to the learning of that script. And there's so much stuff on the internet that just copying something might not necessarily be the best way for you to learn, because it will teach you bad habits at the beginning. So this is one of the biggest cons of calligraphy being on the internet. One of the
There,
greatest pros is access to teachers, because lots of us teach online, lots of us have classes, and you can, whereas before, lots of people have said to me they couldn't actually attend any of my classes because it was too far for them to travel. But with Zoom now, and our classes on Zoom, people can attend classes. Some people have, one of the other things that, and I really want to talk about this, is one of the other things people have said to me is they have disabilities. They've not been able to leave their house. So being able to access the courses online have been amazing for lots of people with disabilities. And it's something those of us who don't have disabilities have never really had to consider. So it's been great also, becoming more aware of everybody's sort of situation and status. Your turn.
yes, that's great. We're gonna we're gonna continue with this topic next week. And now we go into tools and materials and talking about Nibs, which is kind of funny.
Nibs.
Talk about Nibs on the Nibs podcast. Yeah, yeah. What about Nibs? Like,
So in this section on understanding your tools and materials, the last section we talked about pencils. And I finished off with different types of pencils, and I also mentioned about the possibility of color pencils. Now that's an entirely different topic to the drawing pencils, the graphite drawing pencils. If you want me to talk about those colored pencils, by all means, let us know, and I will come back to this for you.
yes, such stuff like questions and suggestions you can do either on the YouTube channel if you're watching the podcast, or drop us a message on Instagram at Nips Podcasts. Also, you can follow there for updates and everything around the podcasts. Also,
Yeah.
last thing before before Paul continues talking, I'm currently working on a section on the website on Calligraphy Masters for Nips podcast. So everything is coming really cool. Uh, I'm not gonna say anything else because by the time people hear this, it will have happened. But yeah, let's go.
All right, so we're going to discuss. I'm going to talk about nibs with you.
Yes, my favorite
So
nips are browse nips. Seriously, I don't know. Like I have a box of Gillot something. I'm not sure, but the thing is, I'm not good with pointed nips, and they don't work in my hands. I don't know why.
probably because you press too hard.
No, I don't. Like I've tried to make them ready with the
Saliva.
with saliva, but I'm not sure if I've done it correctly because
All right. So the thing about nibs is this. Nibs are generally made of little pieces of metal. They are heated to anneal them, and once that heat treatment happens, it causes the nib to harden. So one of the worst possible things you can do for a nib is to put it through a flame. Because as soon as you put the nib through a flame, it changes the temper in the nib and it softens the metal, which means the nib will not last as long as it should last. Because you like to put it in the flame until you see it white hot and dip it in the ink so you hear. If that happens, you've completely changed the hardness of the nib. So it's much softer than it originally came to you. So how do you clean the nib? So, I generally use saliva to clean the nib. Saliva has a slightly higher pH balance. I take a piece of a napkin and I spit on it and I put the nib in the napkin and I go off and I do whatever I have to do. And, depending on the type of nib, you can leave it in the saliva for 30 seconds. You can leave it for up to a minute. And what it does is it cleans the outer coating off, because the nibs come with a coating on them to stop them from rusting when they're in the stores. The finer the nib, the more careful you have to be. So if it's like a Gillot 303, never, ever, ever put it through a flame. The tip of the nib will heat up so quickly. By the time you realize it's heated up, it's already lost its temper, and it will be very soft, and it'll wear away very quickly.
Oh,
So fine nibs like Gillot 303s are really... Yes.
I feel like we've discussed this already in one of the first episodes, but I'm not sure, like, where we talk about potatoes and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Is it? Is this true?
We did talk about it, but I'm sort of putting all the nibs together.
Yeah, guys, this is happening because, like, there were some big pauses between recording the episodes, but I'm pretty sure at one point they're not gonna be...
We did talk about the potato.
Yeah, maybe
it'll be fun.
But
So you have your pointed nibs, but you have different types of pointed nibs. So you have very soft, fine, sharp pointed nibs like Gillot 303 and Hunter 22B nibs. And then you have slightly more robust nibs like a Gillot 404. And then, of course, you go into things like the G nibs. That's a whole other category. Because remember, G nibs were not made for calligraphy.
Oh,
they were actually made for manga.
Manga. I think my nibs are G. Like, they have a G on the nib.
Oh God, they're so blunt and hard. And anyway, the thing about the G nibs is they are coated very, very thickly, so it's very difficult to get them to do really fine hairlines like a 303 nib. Don't stick your nibs into potatoes, because if you're clumsy, you can damage the tines. Of course, you would never do that with a broad edge nib. So now you have those pointed nibs, and the next type of nibs, the next category of nibs, are the broad edge nibs. Broad edge nibs would do things like Romans, italic, textualis. Please don't call it italics, because italics is what happens on your screen when you press italic to the letters for your fonts. Italic, ITALIC, is the script, right? So italic, and then the Gothic scripts, obviously textualis, fractal, all of those. So they're all done prior to. So those are poster nibs. So
those two are posters. This is browse.
That's a browser nib, yes.
Yeah.
So the general nibs these kinds of nibs are generally referred to as round hand nibs. And it's because Edward Johnston came up with this script called foundational, which is also known as round hand. So that sort of stuck with the broad edge nibs. Now, broad edge nibs come in different kinds of cuts. You have a left oblique cut where the nib is this way. You have a right oblique cut where the nib is that way. And you have a straight cut where the nib is straight across the top. Be conscious of the cut. So browser nibs have a small, like a 3-degree cut to them. So if you're trying to do a script that requires you to be at 30 degrees, you'll find that the angle of the cut on the nib you need to compensate for that angle.
Which is the best nib?
The ones that do the liquid pencil writing.
You remember it. Okay. Liquid nibs. Liquid nibs are the best.
So there isn't really a best nib. It sort of depends on what you're trying to do. So if, for instance, we go back to the pointed nibs. If I'm writing at 0.5 millimeter in height, I would use a Gillot 190 nib, because it's very sharp, very fine, very, very fine tines. So it allows me to write copper plate script at 0.5 millimeter in height and be really accurate. A 303 will do it as well. If I'm writing bigger, like at 6 mil, I can still use a Gillot 303. But the problem is the contrast between the thick strokes and the thin strokes will be so great that it can make the writing difficult to read. So I'll probably use something like 122B nib.
You know what's funny?
What?
Like last time you said, Oh, I'm not doing only pointed pen work. And now you just automatically switch just talking about pointed nibs.
Yeah,
Pointed nibs.
because lots of people use pointed pens, and it's very difficult to find information on it.
Well,
So
lots of people use broad edge nibs as well.
I will get to the broad edge nibs. So now there is an intermediate nib called a Gillot Music nib, which has 3 tines on it. Where is it? There should be one here. It has, here it is. It has 3 tines on it. Let's just put this in. So when you spread the nib,
Oh,
you see those 3 tines there, right?
okay.
Now, this does broad edge script work, but because it flexes, it can also do copper plate script at about 15 millimeters in height. That's like an O. An O would be 15 mil high. Now, getting back to the point to the broad edge nibs, when you get to broad edge nibs, you have the browser nibs, which have this little angle. In my experience, there is a range in which these nibs fall into. The most rigid nibs in the round hand nibs are the manuscript nibs, manuscript round hands.
Mm-hmm.
So they are straight cut, but their edges are rounded and the metal is a little bit thicker, so they're great for beginners. Next, I would go to the browser nibs. They have a little cut on them, so they're not completely straight across. They're a little less rigid, but they are sharper at the edges.
Which
So
scripts? Which scripts are they good for?
Oh, they're good for any broad edge script like Textualis or Fraktur or Roman or
Okay,
Foundational.
in this case, is there any specific nib that is better than the others for Fraktur and, you know?
Not really. I mean, they tend well. So the next nib up is the William Mitchell nib, which is the softest nib. The tines are longer, the metal's thin, and it flexes a little bit more, and it's straight across the top. I find those are really good for Fraktur because sometimes with Fraktur you want a little bit of flex to the nib. So you want a nib that responds to you, and of course I'm talking about myself. I have a very, very, very delicate touch. So when I write with a William Mitchell round hand nib, I don't press, so the tines don't spread. If I want to press, then I can apply that pressure. For a lot of people, when they go to writing, they immediately press on the nib. So if that's your situation, you want a more rigid nib. So that's it. Yeah. So that's a
This says Leonard round England
hand. Yes. So that's a Leonard round hand.
It's not the Mitchell one you said, or is the same?
No, it's not the same. The Mitchell,
Okay.
and the other thing about these nibs is the Mitchell nibs and the manuscript nibs have slightly different numbering on them. So be really conscious of that. Now, the next nib to add into that is the Speedball C series nibs. And so they're pretty big nibs. So that's a Speedball C nib. And you can see it has a little edge to it. It's not straight across. And it also has 3 tines. So it's a little bit flexible, but it's a thicker metal. And so those are your broad edge nibs for writing smaller. Now, as soon as you decide to write bigger, you have these. So you have automatic pens. So this is an old automatic pen. Where is it? It's here. Look how beautiful this is. Look at that mill head.
Oh, I think, yeah, I've seen it when I was, and you have also Pratic pens.
Yeah, and you have so this is an automatic pen as well. And then the next shape like an automatic pen are the Pratic pens. So Pratic pens are, so these are the Pratic pens.
But you know, there is even something newer.
What?
Elite pens.
The Elite pens, yes.
Yes. With Calligraphy Masters logo on them.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't have one of those.
I'm the only one.
Well, I have a Paul Antonio one.
Well, I don't have one of those.
And so the size of the tool is directly proportional to the scale at which you're writing. What is that? So that's the folded pen. Yeah,
It's
what? Finland. Um, so those are your broad edge nibs. Now, there are other types of metal broad edge nibs, which are vintage nibs. And so these are nibs that were made historically, and they could be sort of mostly metal nibs start. The production of metal nibs start roughly around 1850.
wait, wait.
That is not to say that historically there weren't metal pens in the past. I've just been reading this amazing article about copper pens where the whole pen is made with a nib on the end. I mean, brilliant stuff, right?
Is like a vintage nips. You have a lot to say, right?
Yes.
So we'll
Well, not no no
continue.
not a lot, not a lot.
Well, but
The
in
thing about
general about
no no no
nips.
no, I don't have a lot to say about it. The thing
Okay.
about vintage nibs is this: they are excellent nibs if you can get them. The only problem is they are really 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 pricey, and when you find a vintage nib that you like, it's so pricey that by the time you destroy it, chances are you won't be able to find another one. So, just be conscious of the vintage nibs. And there is one other type of nib that exists. These are very rare, and these were nibs which were actually cut out of quills to insert into pen staffs.
What?
So they are so you know how you have a nib, right? Let's get a nib.
But
You know how you have that, right?
yes, and it's made out of quill.
It's made out of the beginning of the quill,
Do you
so
have
that
such
they could.
nips?
Oh, I have a couple of them in the drawer over there.
Okay. Huh.
But
Wow.
I found a box of them in a charity shop. I've used them; they're excellent. But once you've used them up, you've used them up. So that's sort of about it with nibs. Just remember, be careful with your nibs. Keep your nibs clean. Saliva is your best friend when it comes to cleaning the nibs. I know some people are like, "Oh my god, it's your saliva. Nobody else is licking the nib for you." Um, and some people use Windolene and Windex. The problem with these things is they have chemicals in them, and if you accidentally lick the nib because you want to get the ink flowing, you might get some of these chemicals in your mouth. Also, take the nib out of the holder if you're going to clean it. Because if you leave the nib in the holder and you clean it, you'll get water up the ferrule. And once water gets up the ferrule, it'll cause the nib to rust. And once the nib is rusted, you cannot get it out without a pair of pliers, by which time you would have destroyed the nib.
Also, next week we'll continue talking about tools and materials because, as you know, Paul, he can talk so long, but we have 15-minute segments and we have to jump into the last segment, which is
Yes.
straight and oblique holders and the history of oblique
Okay.
holders.
So, oblique holders didn't really come into play until the beginning of the 20th century, roughly around that time. So, copperplate script, which evolved out of English roundhand. English roundhand was written with English roundhand is a script which was developed in England roughly around 1600. It's a confluence of scripts, sort of incorporating aspects from the French Ronde, um, the Flemish current script, and English bastard secretary hand. The confluence of these things brought together enough information to create this beautiful script called English roundhand. English roundhand was written with a pointed, flexible nib. Sorry, it was written with a quill back then, but remember the quill did not come to a point. This is the mistake that lots of people make when they think, oh, the quill was cut at a point, came to a point. It did not come to a point. It was a small left oblique cut. So it was cut like this, but it was tiny. Yes, it is a broad edge nib. So it's a broad edge cut, and what you would do is you'd rock onto the flat to get the thicker part, and you'd rock onto the corner to get the thinner nib, the thinner strokes. A little bit complicated, but eventually what started to happen was they started to make these things called quill cutters. So this is a quill cutter. What you do is you put the quill in here and you press down and it cuts the tip off and it comes out pointed. So they started moving towards pointed quills, which weren't necessarily the best thing for the script because it actually makes the script a little bit sloppier because the quill sort of flexes and it's quite problematic to control it. And it's also problematic to keep it sharp. In 1850, roughly around 1850, of course, metal nibs were being fashioned earlier than 1850, but they really only went into mass production after the Industrial Revolution in England in 1850, and that's when they started to be mass produced. So the metal nibs used in holders back then were used in straight holders. So English roundhand is a straight cut, is a straight holder, pointed nib. Copperplate script, in my history of copperplate script, I make a distinction between Proto-English roundhand, English roundhand, its variations across 250 years, and when it gets to 1850, because once it gets to 1850, I call the script copperplate because it's being done with a pointed, flexible metal nib, and the structure and shape and form and essence of the script is actually so much more different from its ancestor English roundhand. It's closer to what happens when a burin, which is particular tool to engrave into copper, cuts, or as we say, strikes into the copper. So that's why I call it copperplate script. The script's after 1850. Now in 1860, Platt Roger Spencer came up with Spencerian script. Even when Spencer was writing Spencerian script, he used a straight holder. And much later on, his sons, when they started teaching Spencerian, they developed the oblique holder. Now, the American penmen did not like this because it actually made the writing of Spencerian script easier, and they wanted people to sort of struggle a little bit to learn the script properly. So Spencerian script, because they were trying to protect their market. So if you make a tool that makes the writing easier, then more people can get into the market, right? But the Spencer brothers didn't care, because their aim was to get people writing. Now, Spencerian script started to operate on the basis that you're using muscular movement, and when you use an oblique hold, a straight holder, the nib is there in line with the holder. It's like this. When you use an oblique holder, the flange on the outside of the nib is actually more like this. So when you write with a straight holder, the nib is there. But when you're writing with an oblique holder, the nib is there. So the flange is lower, so the tines can spread open quicker and come back together without being damaged. So oblique holders are really meant for Spencerian script, not copperplate. The problem with copperplate script is people don't really know what they're writing. So this comes back to what we were talking about calligraphy on the internet. Copperplate script is an umbrella for lots of other scripts, and these scripts have specific names. For instance, in England, we have an English copperplate script, which we never used oblique holders for. But in America, they developed engrossers and engraver script and Zenarian copperplate. These were all done with oblique holders. And if you look at the scripts done in America at this time, you'll see where the deposition of weight exists on the script. And that tells you whether or not it's a straight or an oblique holder.
Well, it tells you if you're Paul Antonio, because people like me, they can look at it and still like, what?
But it's easy to. I've trained my students how to look at those scripts, and I was giving a class recently, and one of my students, it was a calligraphy and meditation workshop on. Once you did the calligraphy and meditation class and you understood the breathing, we had a big workshop recently, which taught you how to take that breathing technique and apply it to the writing of a script. And I said to the students, okay, so pick up any tool and write your name with it. And I was talking to the students after, and one of them said, since I started learning with you, I've not picked up my oblique holder because I realized that the copperplate script I was learning, I was struggling with it because the oblique holder was not helping me.
People, are you listening? There are so many people who write copperplate with oblique. Listen what Paul is telling you right now. Listen very carefully.
So she then said, right, well, So during the class, she said, I went to pick up the oblique holder and I had so much fear because in her mind, she was still thinking copperplate. Now, when I use an oblique holder, but I only ever use it for some types of modern calligraphy, but principally for Spencerian script. Because the holder, the flange on the holder is at 52 degrees and copperplate script is written at 55 degrees. And you might be surprised at how much, but it makes a huge difference in the writing of the script. So that there are lots of things to consider when using an oblique holder. Of course, my biggest bugbear for an oblique holder is if you're doing copperplate script with an oblique holder, there's no way to cross the top of the T or the F or to do the bottom of the L or the Q because you can't turn the holder all the way around to try and get it to do what a straight holder will do if you just turn it horizontally. And as soon as that happened for me, and don't get me wrong, I started copperplate script with a straight holder when I moved to this country from Trinidad after my 2 years of training at Reigate studying calligraphy and heraldry. I then picked up the oblique holder. I thought, oh, this is really easy with the oblique holder. 2 years after that, something happened, and I realized that I couldn't do the top of the T and the F and the bottom of the L and the Q. And I thought, well, what's going on here? And that's what made me realize this tool is not for this script. Because if some parts of the letters cannot be made by the tool easily, then that tool is not for that script. So that's what made me really sit down and think, oh, what actually is going on here? So you need to be a little bit more conscious of how you're writing. If you're finding there are problems with the way in which the tool makes the script, then chances are the tool is not the right tool for that script.
Have you seen
So
people? Have you seen people writing with oblique pen holder and a broad edge nib on it?
Oh my goodness. Somebody sent me a video saying, I can't get this to work. I had to wait for a day before I replied. It's like, let me not just reply to this question because goodness knows what will come out of my mouth. So I waited a day and then I said, first of all, this nib is not meant for this script. And then she sent me an image of a company in India making a kit with broad edge nibs and an oblique holder in it. I was horrified. But before I went off on a tangent and attacked the company, yeah, I sent a really vicious email saying, "What stupidness is this? What are you trying to do to people?" I thought, okay, let's see if it'll work. So I didn't just sort of get on my high horse and just tell them off. I sat there with an oblique holder. So I have I have tons of oblique holders, right? So I sat there with an oblique holder, and I mean, there are two things to tell you about this. This is just horrific, right? The first issue was I saw somebody using an oblique holder with a pointed nib in it like this. And I saw this clip on Instagram and I thought, what? Let me go and find my glasses. I'm sure I'm not seeing this correctly. So I go back, I put my glasses on, I zoom in, and I'm like, what? And she was writing with the tool like this. Now, this cannot work for a number of reasons. The main reason is this. Do you see that? Do you see how the tool goes below the ruler? That means that if you are writing like this, the tool will be on the page, because most people actually write lower down than I write. So they're like this. That is, I'm holding this tool like that, and already I can feel the pain in my hands. So that's cause for a lot of problems. I was horrified when I saw this. The next thing was this. So I thought, well, I've never actually tried it. So you know what? Before I tell this company off, let me try and see what will happen. Obviously, it didn't work. I mean, I couldn't get it to work. It was just because the only way to get it to work is to turn it whilst you're trying to use it. And of course, that is asking for trouble. So,
Now I want to try as well. Okay, people, everybody who is listening, go grab a oblique holder and put a broad edge nib, make a
so
writing,
I,
and send it to us.
so I then wrote to the girl and I said, listen, you need to take this video down. I said, what you're doing is incorrect and you're going to show people something incorrectly and you are going to affect the learning of quite a lot of people drastically. You have a responsibility. If you're going to start teaching, you need to understand what the tools do and how to use them. So, in the end, she sort of sent me back a message and, she was not very friendly because she thought that, I should be minding my own business. But it is my business. What people do with calligraphy is my business.
Yes.
So in the end, she got back to me eventually and she said, oh, hi, sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I did some research and it just seems that this is wrong. And I just didn't know because I taught myself. And I was like, all right,
You know what's
that's
funny?
great.
Just yesterday I received such message because last week some person, I don't remember, a man or a girl, which it off and I spent like 10 minutes I spent like 10 minutes explaining because I knew she's wrong, but she was just so ignorant. And then I was like, okay, whatever. I blocked her. And yesterday, I'm really sorry. I was wrong. Those people.
Did you see in that calligraphy group, the group with Sachin, and this guy asked a question. Oh, can anybody help me with this? Blah, 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 blah. So I, took my time and I wrote this message saying, what you want to do is you want to do this. Don't just do it on the page. Rule up some lines. Learn properly. Blah, 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 blah. He then wrote back and he said, yeah, but I want to do my own style and I don't need to follow that kind of thing. So I wrote back a message and I said, you know what? It's entirely up to you to do what you choose to do with your life, and however you want to choose to write lettering is entirely yours. I obviously have no idea what I'm talking about. So don't take my stupid advice. So I posted that. Like 20 comments from people going, oh my God, Paul Antonio took his time to answer you and you don't even know who he is. You're so lucky, you idiot. But I also said, you only have one chance. So don't bother to write to me again. And people were just like, oh, you get all this advice and you're not even going to look at it. So, it's, 10, 15 years ago, it would bother me. Now, I really don't care because I help people who want to learn. If you want to learn, I'm happy to help you because I want to help you get better. If you don't want to learn or you want to do your own nonsense, then go off and do your own nonsense, Stick the nib in your mouth and cut your tongue or whatever. I don't care. Stick the nibs.
Everybody is allowed to have bad choices,
Of course, You take your choice and mess up your lettering.
Okay, guys, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. As always,
keep writing
correctly.
Now
I know.